Hello and welcome to In the Spotlight with Quocirca, the definitive podcast on digital disruption in the print industry. I'm Louella Fernandez, Director of Quocirca, and today I'm joined by Ian Pratt, Head of Global Security at HP. Today we'll be discussing how HP is advancing endpoint security through capabilities such as threat containment and endpoint isolation. So welcome to the show, Ian. It's great to have you here today.
Well, thanks for inviting me.
So before we get into the conversation, could you tell us a bit about yourself? I know you've got a really fascinating career history and your role at HP today.
Sure. So my role at HP is Global Head of Security, which means I'm responsible for the security of our personal systems products, so the security capabilities we build into our PCs, but also the security software and services that we sell not just on our own PCs, but systems from other vendors too. About my career, well, my background was originally as an academic. So I led what's called the Systems Research Group at the University of Cambridge for over a decade. And I've always wanted to sort of commercialize the things which we were creating in research throughout my career. So I've actually been founder of 4 startup companies, 3 of which ended up being acquired by large US multinationals. And ended up working at those companies. One of the companies was a company called ZenSource, which came out of work we did at the university to create the first infrastructure as a service cloud and the Zen hypervisor. So that was a very exciting time building all of that and really, creating a lot of that infrastructure that we now sort of take for granted today. And I started a company called Bromium. Some co-founders to really look at how we could apply some of what we learned, building hypervisors to enable cloud, to actually apply that to sort of endpoints, to use that to solve various security problems on endpoints. And Bromium was acquired by HP 4 years ago, and that's how I joined HP, and I had a lot of fun, bringing that technology into HP and building out our portfolio.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting career journey. And I know you've got a PhD in computer science as well. And I think, it's because I studied computer science at university as well. And I know back then it was really at the kind of leading edge in terms of technology and even before the internet. And I think it's just fascinating to see how you've kind of been involved in those startups over the last few decades. Yeah, really fascinating. So, so you mentioned Bromium. So could you tell us a bit about how HP Wolf Security came about from that technology and how that's applied to some of the endpoint devices that HP has?
Yeah, so HP really has had a leadership position in security, I would say, for about the last 2 decades, because that was when the HP Lab Security Research Lab was first created. And there are so many things in the PC world, in the print world, that we take for granted from a security point of view today, which were actually invented in HP labs, first shipped on HP systems, and then work that was done to try and standardize that and sort of pull the level of the industry up. And so HP is very proud of what it's done over a couple of decades. A few years ago, there was a decision made to not just worry about the security of the hardware and firmware, but to really think about the whole problem, how we can actually help secure the operating system, applications, user data, content too. And that led to the acquisition of Bromium and the desire to sort of build out a whole set of security products to solve that whole problem, really focusing on the endpoint, because that's obviously where HP is focused, but to really be experts and have the best security on the endpoint, and that's what we've built over the last few years.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, HP has a very strong heritage in security for its devices, and this seemed like the natural step to kind of advance those capabilities. So before we get into the strategy around HP Wolf Security and some of the features, can you talk a bit about the threat landscape? I think it's interesting to understand for the audience how the threat landscape is evolving, how it's becoming more complex and sophisticated, and perhaps the impact of AI as well there.
year on year, I think everybody knows that the threat landscape gets more aggressive, and the obvious reason for that is that people, i.e. the bad guys, are making a lot of money out of attacking our systems. I'd say that that's really 95% of the problem is organized crime, deliberately, targeting systems to then monetize that attack, whether it's through ransomware or intellectual property theft, or exploiting information which they've learned from those attacks. And there's still obviously nation state attacks happening. The pre-positioning, as it's sometimes called, of compromising systems to then stay hidden. Those attacks you don't hear about as much. They're typically much harder to detect because no one comes to you asking for money. But obviously, over the last couple of years, we've seen a rise in that kind of activity as well. And there's still activist hackers, but the problem, the broad scale problem, really is down to organized crime. And we've seen how they've evolved in terms of how they best monetize these attacks. We've seen ransomware scams. Rather than compromising a single machine and asking for a couple of $100s, they now play the long game. They behave more like these advanced, persistent threat actors or nation state actors used to do, of trying to be stealthy after their initial attack and then move around the network, trying to get to systems that are critical to the company, where they can actually hold the whole company to ransom and ask for millions of dollars. And so, we've seen that evolution, and they're being very successful at it. They're making an awful lot of money, and that's just fueling, R&D, if you like, to create these more effective attacks. And that's what's, creating the problem for all businesses and users out there.
Yeah, and I think I read somewhere that the cybercrime industry, if it was a region or a country, it would be the third biggest economy in the world. And I think these they're run like legitimate companies with CEOs and head of cyber crime and so on. It's
we've absolutely seen a whole sort of supply chain develop of different organizations or that specialize in different parts of the tools that you need for performing an attack. And that's why these attacks are becoming so good. It's because of the level of organization. That's certainly the case.
Yeah, and I think we'll come on to AI in a bit more detail later in the conversation, and how that's almost democratizing cybercrime as well and making it more accessible. But before we get on to that, could you tell us a bit more about some of the technology that you've got on the HP Wolf Security portfolio? Because I know there's quite a few different functionality and capabilities, and it's mainly on the PC devices, but I know you've got some on the print side as well.
Yeah, so sort of focusing on PCs to start with, I would say there are two things which really distinguish us from sort of traditional software vendors, doing security, and that's number one, obviously, is on our PCs we control the hardware, so we can build custom silicon that we then put into our machines to help them defend themselves, and that's something which we've been doing since 2013, and that was when we built our first security controller chip and put it into our commercial systems. We're now up to our fifth generation of security chip. And, we've seen over the last few years how other companies like Google and Apple have the T1 and the Titan chip. But, we've been doing this for a long time, and still in the PC world, having this security chip and, and the capabilities that we have is unique. And as well as the hardware, obviously we control the firmware and the software running on it. So that's something that we can do that a traditional software vendor, security company can't do, and that's a huge advantage, particularly with these as these attacks get more sophisticated. You really need to be operating underneath them to see what's happening. And then the other area where we have key technology differentiation is around our use of virtualization. So, there is a hypervisor, built into every, HP commercial system. As the machine boots, everything is running in a virtual machine, so we can observe what's happening and check that everything is going as we expect. And we can have that virtualization technology also running at runtime, such that individual tasks that the user is performing are each put in their own virtual machine, so that we can contain them and monitor them. And we use that technology in a number of different ways. We can either use it to contain risky activities, or to protect the things which we care most about. And that's really a unique capability that we have. And in terms of how we sort of take this to market, we have a number of different offers for different parts of the market. But certainly for SMB customers, we have a sort of complete security solution for their endpoint. It's Wolf Pro Security, which is has been very successful being sold with the PC. And for enterprise customers, for larger customers that already have an existing endpoint security stack, we can augment that with our unique capabilities, which mesh well with the tools that they're already using, and fit smoothly into their environment to give them that additional protection that traditional security companies wouldn't be able to do.
Yeah, and I think, typically I would say with large enterprises, they must be utilizing so many different security tools. And, it's really important to have that kind of integration with those tools. But also on the SMB side, I was curious because particularly with the audience for this podcast, potentially there's a lot of channel partners. And I was wondering what you think would be the main opportunity for channel partners to build a security proposition around Wolf security. So you mentioned you've got some sort of flexible packages that they can sell to their customers. Is that right?
Yeah, so certainly on the SMB side, as I said, we have Wolf Pro Security. That is it's complete SMB security solution. It really is. Combines a number of different capabilities. Obviously, it has a next generation antivirus. Everything these days is called next generation there, but it's really is a very capable antivirus that uses machine learning technology to try and identify threats. Using those machine learning models to try and stay ahead of the changes, the mutations which the attackers are making to their malware to try and remain undetected. The machine learning tries to adapt to that. But beyond that, we then have the threat containment technology, such that as a user goes about their daily work, you have to do things like click to open an email attachment you received from a supplier or someone applying for a position in the company, or research things on the web. All of these activities are exposing your machine to potential harm. And if all of these risky activities, for every one of those activities, we start a virtual machine, running on your endpoint, your desktop, laptop, and use that virtual machine just for that activity. And then when that activity finishes, throw that virtual machine away and ensure that virtual machine has access to only the resources that are required for that task and no more. So just access to that particular document, none of your other documents, none of your identity or credentials. Then, if that web page or that document does turn out to be malicious, well, there's no harm going to come to you as a result of that. There's nothing to steal, no way for the attacker to move to other virtual machines or the physical systems. And then as soon as you finish that task, as soon as you finish reading the document or the web page, you're going to close that document and the virtual machine is going to be disposed of. So it means that you're able to provide protection without relying on detection. So even if the antivirus misses something, you're still going to have that threat contained within a virtual machine and then disposed of. So that's a very unique capability that we have. So that's threat containment. And then the final piece is around protecting the user from credential phishing attacks. There's a lot of attacks which try to mimic, whether it's an Office 365 login, a PayPal login, and get people to give up their credentials effectively. And our credential protection sort of detects that happening and then warns the user, takes them to safety. So that sort of set of capabilities we call Wolf Pro Security, including the hardware capabilities, all the security capabilities built into the hardware, such as the ability to ensure that the machine always boots in a legitimate fashion, running the code we expect it to, that can't be compromised, and also ensuring that if a machine ever does get compromised, that you can get that operating system reinstalled and get the user back up and running again. So those kind of capabilities are built in when you buy it with the hardware as well, and all managed in a single pane of glass. So the opportunity for channel partners is to obviously take that to SMB customers, into mid-market. We have plenty of partners who are doing that and managing, selling it with a new machine, where you can buy a Wolf Pro Security Edition version of a PC that includes those capabilities, but also actually selling it across the customer's existing estate of PCs, which might be older HP machines, it might be other vendors' machines, but they can all be brought in, and those security capabilities, at least the software powered ones, as opposed to the ones that rely on our security controller chip, can certainly be delivered to all of those machines. And there's a management console to enable you to do that management at scale.
And I think it's really interesting, because what we see in the SMB space is that they're becoming not more vulnerable, but they kind of lack the awareness of the potential threats in some areas, and they don't often have the resources and budget to have the same protection in place as maybe large enterprises. So these kind of packaged solutions really fit well with that kind of requirement.
And I think one of the great things about, certainly from a partner perspective, is, unlike some of these tools which require sort of constant monitoring, they're alerting you to some threat that's happened, and then you've got to take action to remediate that machine. Particularly the technology with the threat containment, where we're using these disposable virtual machines. The great thing about that is, it'll generate a message saying that it's contained something, but there's nothing to do because that virtual machine has been disposed of. So you're back to a clean state. There's no running around, trying to figure out what to do, whether you need to re-image that machine or get the recover the data. That, because of the containment, that all happens automatically when you dispose of the VM. So it's easy for partners, basically.
Yeah, and I think that's a really important aspect, because I guess with any endpoint, PCs and printers, it's not just the accessing information on the device, but it's that lateral movement to the network that I guess you're protecting. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, if you think that, it's kind of crazy, really, isn't it? That just doing, when I open a email attachment from somebody I've never heard of before, applying for a job, that the consequences of that could be huge. That it could be malicious, it could compromise the application, it could then compromise my machine, and then it has access to everything I and my machine have access to, everything else on the enterprise network. It can, that I have access to, it now has access to, and that's really a failure of isolation, or failure of implementation of least privilege. And by using these disposable virtual machines, we can actually enable that least privilege to be implemented, or the catchy buzzword for that these days is zero trust. But rather than just applying it to the network, actually applying it to individual tasks that you're performing on your machine, to be able to limit the impact and contain them to just what you expect to happen.
And like you say, it's a proactive service, so it's not something that the end user has to be aware of or impacted by, because it's...
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly absolutely our goal, is to make it transparent. All of these virtual machines are coming in and out of existence in the background, but, from a user experience point of view, it's just as you expect. And that's really been enabled by work which we've done over many years with Intel, AMD, and more recently ARM, of getting capabilities built into the CPU so that we can virtualize create these VMs very quickly, that they're very low overhead and very secure.
Yeah, and I think picking up on the point about printers being potentially vulnerable points on the network, and I think there's always what we see with our research. There's a perception that the security risk of printers is still related to the documents that may be left in output trays, but clearly the typical smart MFP is a connected device. It connects to the network, and again, it can be used as a ingress point to access the corporate network more broadly. So I know HP has really shaped the print security market, and for many years, having the secure printers over both MFPs and the A4 devices. So I'm curious as to if you could tell us a bit more around the Wolf security technology that's built in there. I know you have things like runtime intrusion, BIOS protection, and so on, but just like to understand a bit more how those are implemented.
Yeah, so obviously, as you pointed out, printers are computers, and also ones which traditionally, by default, out of the box, have offered a lot of different services to make it convenient for the user. But that's all provided multiple points of potential entry for attackers. So sort of managing printers and locking down to just what you need is important. But looking beyond that. We want to make sure those systems boot securely, just like we do with the PC. So we've been able to take that security chip which we built on the PC side, and also it's used in many of the printers too, to ensure that we can do that secure remote management, that we can make sure that the system only boots legitimate firmware and not firmware which has been compromised to send a copy of every document printed to an attacker, or to use it to probe the network, so we can avoid that. But also now we're even beginning to see some of the virtualization technology get built into some of the printers, such that we can run everything in virtual machines and then monitor their execution, so we can look for things going awry and restart the printer, knowing that we're going to get back to that secure state. Some of the intrusion detection capabilities, and also in future, there is always potential that when you could have, and there have been instances of documents themselves being malicious, that rather than infecting the PC that you look at them on, they could infect the printer that you printed them on. So again, virtualization technology can come into play there to contain the threat of rendering a document to send it to the print engine. So there's a lot of crossovers between the technology that we create on the PC side and then feeding that into the print side.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting that HP is so well positioned to be in both the PC and the print side, because from the channel perspective, if they're selling the devices with printers, then there's a way they can have a consistent message through Wolf Security for both PC and print products. And I think the print security, it's something we've been writing about it for over 10 years, but I think just over the past few years that we're seeing some real examples of, like you mentioned, sort of security breaches around the document, but also malware on devices and so on. And I think it's just going to become more commonplace as attackers look for more vulnerable links in the IT environment. And print still seems to be that weaker link in that overall IT security chain.
Yeah, I think it's traditionally something which has been less worried about, if you like, and often it's more of a mess than perhaps even the PC side. So that's why attackers go where it's easiest.
Exactly. And just sort of switching gears to talk about AI again, because I saw some really great demos. I was at the New York Security Summit where we met, and they were showing the new Intel-based devices with the NPU. And I thought it was really interesting to see how AI was now built into the chips and how it's potentially can have a bit of resurgence in the PC market potentially. So I'd be interested in your thoughts around AI-enabled PCs and laptops, and also how you're seeing AI being harnessed by cyber attackers.
I think the security industry as a whole was actually very quick to embrace, AI or machine learning technologies. I think really going back to 2013, and certainly we have, and I think all vendors have at this point. And the capability that some of these next generation PCs have to be able to run, large ML models locally on the device, and to be able to do that very efficiently using these, NPUs, neural processing units, is very exciting. It's really a step change in the neural compute capability of endpoint devices that we're going to see through the course of this year. And we're seeing the first devices launched in a few weeks, but in terms of where things end up over the next couple of years, it's really impressive actually. And there's a lot of potential there for using those NPUs to help with security. So enabling more complex models to do detection and things like that. And that's really required because over the last, I'd say, last 10 months, really, we've seen the bad guys adopt AI or large use of large language models in particular. The bad guys often are early adopters of technologies, but we've seen how they have been quick to adopt that to make sure that the quality of the text in any sort of email lures or the automated chat responses are very good and extremely hard to spot these days, because they're all chat GPT or the various equivalent open source models. They use these technologies to generate that text. They're able to do things like translate into minority languages, which whether it's Swedish or Danish, where perhaps the folks in those regions were not so, had been accustomed to seeing if it was in their native language, then they'd probably trust it because the bad guys hadn't didn't speak the language and hadn't invested the effort to generate quality lures. But now that's all been democratized, if you like, and they're able to do these attacks at scale. So definitely, we're seeing AI being increasingly used in attack, and that's quite a scary thought for the future, and around using more of these AI techniques to be able to do more sophisticated attacks at scale. That's a major concern for everyone. But again, we do get to use it on the defensive side, both on the endpoint devices, but also in the cloud in terms of, or on servers, in terms of how we do the analysis of all of the threat information that's coming in. So customers using Wolf Pro Security can choose to sort of opt in to share threat intelligence with us. It can just be shared with their managing partner, or they can choose to share it with us. And that gives us a broad view of what's happening across many millions of machines. And for a number of years now, we've been using machine learning techniques to process that information, determine whether we've seen something before and it's just another instance of it, or whether this is an adaptation of something we've seen before, or something that's truly new and interesting that we need to look at further. And that's we publish a quarterly threat report of. And there's a sort of a blog that we're continually publishing on with the interesting things we've seen to provide information to the rest of the security industry and to customers, and typically enterprise customers, so they can defend themselves against these threats that we see that are new. And that's all enabled by this, the ability to do this machine learning at scale, and also. I think one area where it helps is just enabling you to sort of chat with your data, have a way of perhaps if you're not familiar with all of the tools that exist and you just use them occasionally, I guess like I do, having the ability to not have to remember the syntax, all of the queries to mine this data, to be able to do it in using a chat bot and have it build those queries for you is very helpful. So that is actually certainly helping defenders to be more effective. So it's it's an arms race, but one which I think we're going to see. Certainly, the attackers have got a long way to go in terms of their potential adoption of the technology. But I think we're seeing some good ML-powered security tools over a number of years, which are only going to get better on the newer hardware.
Yeah, and I think, like you say, I think AI has been around for decades, but it's really very much a double-edged sword. I think in terms of helping us be more productive, and I would use AI tools almost on a daily basis now. Like, this will be summarized in AI. And, like you say, even if we wanted to, we could post this in German. It would look like we were speaking a different language. I think AI is such a powerful tool, but it's also leaves us vulnerable to attacks, because they're going to be moving as quickly as the security industry is. So it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out over the coming year. So on that note, so what do you think? We sort of touched a bit about on what's coming next, I guess, for cybersecurity, but is there anything in particular you want to share around what's next for HP Wolf Security, and any plans you have for the coming year?
One of the areas that we're really concerned about is attackers using machine learning techniques to create personalized, in an automated fashion, to create personalized attacks. And it used to be that a nation state actor wanting to target someone would do some have humans do some research on them, and then send them an email, or communicate with them on chat in a way that would make them very likely to click on the link and result in their machine being compromised. But we're now beginning to see the potential for doing that in an automated fashion. So having a large language model instructed to research someone on LinkedIn, on other social media, and then create the perfect lure to encourage them to click, and be able to do that at a very large scale. And we certainly expect if you like, the quality of these lures to go up in the coming months, and that's a major concern. So I think we put all of this effort into training users, and to not click on things, and that's obviously good. If users can avoid clicking on the most obvious lures, but I think it's going to be the case that it's going to be impossible for users to tell in the not too distant future, and that's why it's going to be increasingly important to contain the result of a mistake of clicking on the wrong thing, because certainly you want to try and stop it, or spot it, detect it using antivirus. But if that doesn't work, containing the impact of the threat is important. But also, I think organizations are wanting to look at how you can also sort of flip the problem around. How do we protect the things that we care most about, such that just because a user has made a mistake, why does that put this high value data at risk? And again, it's those sort of zero trust principles being applied, not just to the network, but to the device itself. So if you've got, high value things or tasks which are being performed on the device, whether that's, reading a sensitive document, or, accessing, the Swift wire transfer network in the case of the bank, being able to contain those or protect those activities, such that even if the machine does become compromised, the confidentiality and integrity of those particular high value activities are still maintained. And I think that's going to be an important thing that happens over the next year or two. We've certainly got capabilities that we've built that enable that, so that you can compartmentalize the things that you care most about, and ensure that they're safe even if something does go wrong. And that's sort of designing with failure, with resilience in mind, I think is going to be key to actually mitigating the impact of these very sophisticated threats. We can't just rely on detection anymore. The bad guys are using machine generated techniques that are extremely good for avoiding detection. That's only going to get better. And so actually moving more to a model of looking at how we mitigate the impacts of those attacks, and and make them sort of effectively render them harmless, even though somebody did click on that link.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting in terms of the fact that most data breaches are due to employee or internal kind of error. And I think it's so difficult. Like you say, the social engineering now is so sophisticated that emails that look like they come from a member of, the CEO even can look so realistic. So I think we can't really just always rely on employees not realizing that and clicking on.
Yeah, we have to stop blaming the employee. I mean, that's
exactly. And I think, it's been a really fascinating conversation. It's really great to understand a bit more about the technology behind Wolf Security. And we'll put some more details in the show notes, the links to Wolf Security threat report that you mentioned, because I think it's quite a detailed report, but it just shows the scale of some of the threats that are detected out there.
Yeah, no, it's very much aimed at security professionals, but yeah, it gives you an idea of some of the innovation that's happening.
So so thanks again for a great conversation, and thank you again for joining me today. It's been really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you.
So thank you for joining today's episode of In the Spotlight with Quocirca. For more information, please go to quocirca.com and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks again for joining, and I look forward to seeing you in our next episode.